All right, we're moving into Chapter 7, Lesson 4. Now, I've got some water, so hopefully I won't be coughing as much. So we're continuing on with algebraic expressions, but now we're going to identify the pieces of and be able to tell what it is that I'm solving for. So going back to this big algebraic expression that you saw on the previous one. So when I look at this, I have several different pieces, and I'm going a little bit more in depth when I introduce this than the overall book, because this might be some extra stuff that you're going to be shown on NWEA or on the iLearn, and it'll help you be prepared for 7th grade. So there are several facets to this math problem. First is to understand it's an algebraic expression. That means it has numbers and it has letters combined. An expression, there's no answer to it because I don't know what x or y are equal to, but I could solve for it if I was given one or both. When I look at the different parts then, these are the pieces that I introduced to you in the previous lesson. The coefficient. A coefficient is a number multiplied by a variable. And once again, those variables are the letters. So this is x squared, which is a variable, y, which is a variable, x and y multiplied together, that's why they're touching. Those are variables as well. So my coefficients are the whole numbers that are touching those variables. Notice that 4 is not a coefficient. It can't be a coefficient without that letter touching it. So I have a 5, a 2, and a 9. It may be that I have to identify all the coefficients in this algebraic expression, so it would be those 3. Maybe I have to identify the variables. Maybe I have to identify both. So there is a special name for a number that's by itself in an algebraic expression. That's called a constant because it's always going to be there, that extra step that I have to do at the end. The other word that I haven't introduced you to yet is the idea of term. So in an algebraic expression, it's anything that is separated by addition or subtraction. So these are all separated by additions. Therefore, I have 4 terms in this particular algebraic expression. 5x squared is a term. 2y is a term, 9 times x and y is a term, and then that constant of 4 is a term. So as I'm going through these, there's all sorts of different things that I'm going to have to identify, and maybe I don't have to identify all of them, but then I have to be able to explain mathematically what it is it's asking me to do. All right, so this is once again that thinking process that I'm going to follow through with. Here's my scenario that I'm set up with. At a gardening store, excuse me, seed packets cost $2 each. Martin bought 6 packets of lettuce seeds and 7 packets of pea seeds. The expression of 2 times 6 plus 7 represents the cost in dollars of Martin's seeds. Identify the parts of the expression, 1. Then write a word expression telling me what I am doing for 2 times 6 plus 7. So identifying the pieces of it. Identify the operation in this expression. What is the operation? So once again, I have 4 operations, adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. This has a 2-step math problem. So I know I have 2 answers there. I am multiplying with that multiplication sign, but I'm also adding. So I have multiplication and addition as my operations that I'm doing in that math problem. Describe the parts of the expression in parentheses and tell what it represents. So the part in the parentheses shows the blank of 6 and blank. Well, the blank of 6 and blank. So the sum, because it's addition, right? So when I see my addition sign, I know I'm finding the sum, once again, going back to my operations, of 6 and, well, inside the parentheses is 6 and 7. That one should be pretty easy. So I'm finding the sum of 6 and 7. It tells me the sum represents the number of packets of. Oh, okay. So when I look at it, I know that I have 6 packets of lettuce seeds and 7 packets of pea seeds. So we're talking about packets. Okay, so packages of lettuce and packages of, well, the second one was peas, so pea seeds. So I know I have 6 lettuce packets and I have 7 seed packets of peas. All right, That should be pretty easy. Now didn't have enough room, so I just followed along on the next screen. One of the factors is something. The other factor is the blank of 6. So what is a factor? So a factor is when I'm multiplying together in a multiplication problem. So I see that it's 2 times whatever's inside of parentheses. So I know that one factor, the first one is the 2. And then the other factor is that, once again, sum of 6 and 7. So factors, the pieces that are being multiplied together in a multiplication problem. So my 2 comes first, and then I would have to find the sum of 6 and 7, which would be used as my second factor. The product represents the what per packet. Well, that would be the cost, because the 2 tells me how much each of those packets cost. Doesn't matter what kind it is, I just know it costs $2 per packet. So if it's the cost per packet times the number of each type of packet that I'm purchasing. We said that's what the 6 and the 7 represent. So a word expression for this would be the blank of 2, so the product, because I'm multiplying together, the product of 2 and the blank of a number and 7. So what are we doing inside of parentheses? Finding the sum. So the sum of the 6 and the 7. So the 2 parts that I have to do is identify something that it asked me about. It may ask me about the operations that are being done in the expression. It may ask me about the terms. It may ask me about coefficients. It may ask me about variables. And then I have to be able to write out what it's telling me to do. This says that's going to be the product of 2 times the sum of 6 and 7 inside of parentheses. So I write it out in words on what I'm doing. Explain how the expression of 2 times the sum of 6 and 7 differs from 2 times 6 plus 7. Then write a word expression for 2 times 6 plus 7. So how they differ is that there's a different set of parentheses, right? And there's 2 parts to this answer, so I'd have to explain both pieces. Almost every problem that I'm going to do tonight on my homework has at least 2 parts to my answers. I have to make sure I do both pieces. This has to explain how the operations are different. On the first expression, addition would be done first because, why? Because it has parentheses around it. However, the second one doesn't have parentheses, does it? So my order of operations tells me that I would have to multiply and divide from left to right, then do my addition and subtraction. So where the second one, the order of operation tells us to start with multiplication first. So this expression tells me to do what? Because now it says to write word expression for that second problem. So it tells me that I'm going to find 7 more, because I know that I want to add that at the end. Then the product of, because I have to multiply first according to my order of operations, 2 and 6. So I'm going to find my product of 2 and 6, and then I would be adding 7 to it. That's this algebraic expression. Actually, it's just an expression. There's no letters in it. Written out in words on what to do. All right, so once again, looking at my terms, because it may ask me about these terms. My terms are anything separated by an addition or subtraction in a math problem, that's an expression. So I know I have 2 terms here. I have 4k and a term of 5. It may ask me about a coefficient. Once again, a coefficient is a number multiplied by a letter, and that letter is, because it could ask me about variables, going to be a k. All right, so with that, identify the parts of the expression. That's part 1. Then write a word expression for the algebraic expression. So 2. The first one is identify the parts, and part 2 is tell me in words what I would do to solve that. So as I'm thinking through, once again, the light blue tells me I'm thinking about this, I'm just going to fill in the blanks. The expression up here is the sum of, because I know that I'm going to be adding as my last step, the sum of how many terms? So I have to identify how many terms because it tells me I'm looking for terms there. Remember, terms are separated by addition and subtraction. I have one, I have two. So I have two terms. So in my two terms then, the terms are 2x and the 8, separated by that addition. The first term is the product, once again, meaning multiply. I know that because they're touching each other, of the coefficient, a number touching a letter or touching a variable. So it's a coefficient of 2. And the variable, the letter of x. The second term is just the number by itself, right? The number 8. So what this tells me to do in steps, if I tell you in words, it says a word expression for 2x plus 8 is, I'm going to have 8 more than, so I know that's going to be my second step, is adding 8 to whatever I'm doing first. And what I'm doing first is multiplying. So I know that answer is called a product. More than the product of 2 and x. Not a complicated math lesson at all, and it should be a pretty short one when it comes to your homework, but it's just taking your time and thinking about what it's saying and then using those fancy math terms to answer it correctly. All right, so on B, which is right below in your book, I have 3a minus 4b. All right, so let's see what they want me to name here. The expression is the blank of two terms. All right, so it already has two terms there. So what math processes am I doing up here? I'm finding the difference. Now, if I use the word subtraction, that doesn't make sense in my sentence. The expression is the subtraction of two terms. Well, what I need is to know that the answer to subtraction is difference, and then that makes a much better sentence. The terms are, so now I have to identify the terms. The terms are any math separated by addition and subtraction in the center. So I know I have two terms. The terms are the 3a and the 4b. So I have both of them identified. Now I got to describe what it's telling me to do. The first term is the product of the, so the product of the coefficient 3, because it's the number, and the variable that is touching the letter A. So the first term is the product of the coefficient 3 and the variable A. Still I'm identifying those terms. The second term is the product of the coefficient, so that's a 4 because it's a number touching a letter, and the variable B, that's the letter. So now I have to tell in words what I'm doing to solve this. So a word expression would be the difference of, once again, that's the answer to subtracting, and then I'm going to put them in the order in which I need them. In subtraction and division, they have a very specific order they have to go in. Remember, in addition and multiplication, they can go in any order because of the commutative property. So the difference of something times something, well, my first one is 3 and a, so 3 times a, and I put it 2, I apologize, should be 3. And 4b, well, the 4 and the b, they're touching, so that's also multiplication, right? So 4 times the b. So I tell you exactly what I'm doing in my math. It's going to be the difference of 3 times a and 4 times b, telling you in words what I'm doing to solve for the problem. All right, so on this one it says identifying the parts. So I'm filling in these blanks and then writing out in words on what I'm going to do. And then this one doesn't have those fill in the blanks. The part in parentheses shows the, oh, now we got division. Division. What's the answer to division? Quotient, right? So in the parentheses, it shows me the quotient of what two numbers, and I keep them in the order that they're given, of 9 and 3. One factor of the multiplication, so that indicates I'm going to multiply in my last step, and factors are the pieces that are being multiplied together. So one of those is 7, and the other one is the 9 divided by 3. So now I got to tell what I'm doing mathematically to solve for it, but I got to put it into words. So I start with, well, here it shows me I'm going to multiply it by something. So I'm going to have the product of the 7 and, okay, or you can put times there too, the product of 7 times and then I tell you what I'm doing in my parentheses because it's going to come first. The quotient of 9 and 3. All right, so when I look at 2, let's identify the terms. And the terms are the 5m and the 2n. So once again, terms are separated by addition and subtraction. I could also identify the coefficients, which are the numbers being multiplied by letters. And those coefficients are 5 and 2. And then I could also identify the variables, which are m and n. So there are 3 different things that I identified on this one. The terms, the coefficients, and the variables. Now I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. So my last step is doing what? So if I think of order of operations, I know I'm going to multiply these 2 together. Then I'm going to multiply these 2 together. And then my last step is to add. So I know that's how I'm going to start by explaining this. I know I'm going to be finding the sum at the end. But the sum of what? The sum of the products of, because products is multiplying together, 5 and m. So I'm telling you that I'm going to multiply the 5 and m together. And I'm also going to find the product of 2 and n. So you could say the sum of the product of 2 and m and the product of 2 and n. Okay, so 5 and m and 2 and n, I know I'm going to multiply because I use the term of product. Okay, so we're going to do 3 and 4. I know there's a 5 and a 6. We're just going to skip those because it's going to be the same steps over and over again. And this one, I'm going to identify the terms. Well, I have 2 terms because there's 2 things that are separated by this addition. Okay, so I know that I have the 8 and I know I have the 10 minus the 7. I want to tell you what I would do mathematically to solve it, and I know my last step would be to add that 8 to whatever I've done in the parentheses. So I have to start with that I have 8. Now I could put the word plus instead of more, 8 plus, but I put 8 more than, and then what am I doing inside the parentheses? Because that's what I'm going to list there at the end. Inside my parentheses, I'm subtracting, and that answer is called, once again, the difference. So when I read this numerically out loud so that someone can write it down on their paper, I'm saying, well, this is 8 more than the difference of 10 and 7. It's the whole purpose of being able to do this, is to be able to tell somebody what to write down on their paper without saying, okay, write down an 8, write down an addition sign, write down a first parentheses, write down a 10 minus, show subtraction, put a 7, put an n parentheses. I can just tell them, well, it's going to be 8 more than the difference of 10 and 7. On number 4, well, if I look at it, I have 3 different terms. I don't have any coefficients and I don't have any variables because there aren't any letters. So if I explain to you what I'm doing on here, then I know that I'm going to add 8.3 at the end. And why do I know that? Because my order of operations tell me I have to start with multiplication. So I know I'm going to have 8.3 or 8 3/10 more than whatever this is right here. Well, that it right there is the product of 1 5/10 times 6. So when I tell you in words what I'm doing, I'm finding 8 3/10 more than the product of 1.5 times 6. All right, so identify the terms of the expression and then give the coefficient of each term. All right, should be easy enough. I have 2 different things to find here. So identify the terms, separated by subtraction on this one. So I have 2 terms, I have k and 1/3 d. What's my coefficient? Well, coefficient, once again, is any number touching a letter, and therefore I only have 1 coefficient, and that's the 1/3. Easy enough. Number 8, same thing. So terms are separated by addition or subtraction. I have 2 terms. So I have 0.5x and I have 2.5y. And then identifying my coefficients, a number touching a letter, then I have 2 coefficients. I have 0.5 and I have 2.5. So doing these as homework is just simply answering the parts of the questions that it's asking. All right, so now we're going to work through this. It says, Ava said she wrote an expression that with 3 terms. She said the first term has the coefficient of 7, the second term has the coefficient 1, and the third term has the coefficient of 0.1. Each term involves a different variable. Write an expression that could be the expression that Ava wrote. So there's multiple choices here that I could be using for my example. I could use any type of variable. I can use ABC, I can use XYZ, I can use anything in the middle. I can skip around, I can do A, I can do Q, and I can do Z. That doesn't matter. I just need 3 of them. And then I have to use the coefficient. So I know that I have 7A. I chose A because it's the beginning of the alphabet, and to me that was easier. And I have a 7 with it. The second term has a coefficient of 1. Now, actually, now when I think about it, I did this incorrect, and I apologize. And I would write it with my whiteboard, smartboard, but my markers don't work. So this should be 7A plus 1B plus 0.1C. So I apologize. Let me repeat what that should be instead of what I have up there. 7A plus 1B plus 0.1C. All right, so going back through this again. Terms separated by addition or subtraction, 4 terms. Coefficients are the numbers being multiplied by letters. The letters are variables, okay? You can have multiple variables touching one another, so those still count. So there are 3 different variables, 3 different coefficients. This is the constant. That one wasn't being asked about in our assignment. Notice there's fewer questions to do. There's questions 1 through 7, and on the back, questions 1 through 6. So if you have questions as you're doing this, it always seems really complicated, and the biggest problem that most people have with it is they just don't like to write sentences. I promise you can do it. It doesn't have to be a complete sentence. They're just sentence fragments, so you don't have to start with capital letters and endpoints and all that. You just have to be able to tell me in words how I'm going to solve those problems. So if you have any questions, come to the back or ask your classmates for help, and you should be able to get this done before you go home for the weekend.